both departments and just support for 3 years. Yeah. I know.
I'll say 10 plus. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to get us kicked off. I know it's great to have some conversation beforehand, but I also want to keep us to our hour and let you get on with your day afterwards. I'm Laurelyn Sparrow. I'm on the board for City Club, and I work for the city of Springfield. So we're really excited to see a good turnout today. I'd like to have just the other board members either stand or raise their hand just to indicate who else we have here. Nick, Whitney, Len, and Paige. So we are actively seeking a couple board members from community members. So if you are interested, we'd love to have a chat with you after the meeting. So grab one of us board members afterwards if you're interested. And we're always encouraging businesses and other community members to join City Club and help with our effort to get information out into the public. So with no further ado, I will introduce our speakers. I don't know what order they're coming up, so I'm just going to introduce you as a group, and then they can kick off their presentation. So we have Monty Hurley, a principal at AKS Engineering, who has a profound understanding in survey, engineering, planning, and construction support. So Monty's here with us today. Chris Goodell, thank you. He's also a principal at AKS Engineering and is a seasoned professional in field of urban planning and land use regulation. We have Karl Ivanov, who's the president and founder of I&E Construction with a proven record of success and achievement in over 30 years of construction experience. And then Andy Limbird, our senior planner at the city's Development and Public Works Department, and he's the staff project planner assigned to Marcola Meadows neighborhood. So we're excited to have this presentation, and I'll hand it off. It sounds like Andy, you're up first. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Just going to provide a quick overview of the property in question. People that are Springfielders may know the property and kind of its history here. I'm going to be able to advance the slides here. Have to point at anything?
Down.
Okay, so kick things off. So many people historically might know this as the Pierce property. It was owned by the Pierce family for decades. As the neighborhoods kind of grew around the area, I like to refer to it kind of as a bit of a hole in the donut because it's almost geographically central in Springfield. And we had pretty dense urban development all around the perimeter. We've got Marcola Road, which is a major road along the southern boundary. 28th Street, which if you head south, you get to Walmart and Jerry's and stuff. And you got the interstate, or 126 just to the south here. So this area remained vacant for a long period of time. It was used for agriculture. In 2006, a development group called SC Springfield purchased the property with the intent of developing a large commercial center with also a residential component. So in 2008, that group had a zoning changes and a master plan approved for the property. And the primary focus was a big box store. In this case, it was a Lowe's retail center. So I'm gonna bring up the, oops, go back this way. The master plan that was done. Yeah, kind of this way. Or this way. Sorry. Okay, there we go. So the villages at Marcola Meadows were retail villages, not residential villages. At the time, commercial real estate was the premium. And so this development had about 45 acres of mixed-use commercial, almost 50% of a little over 100-acre site. And the primary focus was kind of the aspect from Marcola Road, looking into the site. A big box retailer, in this case Lowe's Home Improvement Center, would be the kind of the anchor tenant with a bunch of different kind of professional offices, other retail around it. So primary focus was the commercial, which would have had a much different, I guess, kind of curb presence. As you notice, if you look closely, and you might be able to see it on some of the materials, there was a roundabout proposed where the street came in. There was a frontage road proposed for the properties. There's residential properties on the south side of Marcola Road. So a lot more traffic, a lot more road improvements associated with this because of the commercial that was proposed. So this is kind of the overall layout. And you can see lots of parking areas, lots of retailers, about half the site. And then the residential was actually kind of a secondary focus because the proponents were not residential developers at the time. They were commercial developers. So this project got all their approvals and was ready to go in 2008, right at the kind of the crest of the economic downturn, right before everything kind of hit the skids. In the West Coast, in our area, it's more like 2010, but they felt the effects immediately. This property ownership group went into receivership and it became bank owned. So unfortunately, the project and the master plan that was developed was kind of dormant. The property became bank owned after the went into receivership, and the bank, which was an out-of-state bank, essentially added timeline to the master plan. They got approval to extend the master plan to the maximum length of 15 years so that it would continue to cover the property while they were trying to actively market it. In 2012, a group came forward with a proposal to site a new Veterans Administration, or VA clinic. The one on River Avenue in Eugene was closing. They were looking at developing a new site somewhere in the Eugene Springfield area. And this site was identified by a development group as a potential candidate site. It remained one of the front runner sites for about a year until there were some changes made to site development approvals in Eugene. The site ended up going over by the Register Guard area in North Eugene, and the project was essentially abandoned, so it went back kind of dormant again. Everything kind of came to a head in 2018. There have been a number of years where there have been a lot of long grass. People were concerned about the condition of the property. It wasn't being maintained. We had an out-of-state ownership group. Some people may recall there was a drone crash. Someone was operating a drone in the field and it crashed and started a fire. And I think people at that time, people were like, something needs to happen here. This is getting way too dangerous for this to be just an empty field. Coincidentally, 2018 was the year that a new development group purchased the property. They approached city staff with some plans. There was initially a little bit of skepticism because, you know, we've seen and heard this before. And I think the community and the staff's desire was we really need to see something happening here. And it happened pretty quickly. So I'm gonna pass it on to Chris. Or sorry, with Karl. Yes, for the next round.
You got that? Hi guys, Karl Ivanov, I&E Construction President. So we got wind of this project in 2018. Came to the banks, started talking to the bank. They were very forceful of how we do this. They're going to buy it now. If not, we're not gonna deal with you guys. And thanks to the city that worked with us, we came in, said we want this, 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 and this. And the City Economic Development Group really stepped up and said, all right, we'll make that happen. So as we're going through our master plan of affordable housing, multifamily, commercial, school, church, the whole thing, the bank is knocking on our door saying, you gotta close this thing. If not, we're moving on to the next guy. They kept on bluffing us. And so we had, the day we tied it up to close on this thing, I think it was less than 6 months. And so I actually took a risk after talking to the city saying, we got you, we're gonna work with you. We closed this thing with no entitlements, no plans, nothing, just basically close a piece of farm dirt for lots of money. As you're shaking your head, they're going, you're crazy. But that's why we came in and moved so fast. And you can see how the project, you know, we started in 19. I came in here and Monty's like, hey, Karl, you're not gonna be able to grade until a year from now because we can't get an early grade permit. I go, no, we're gonna figure this out. Your mayor back then was Christine. I sat down with her for lunch. I said, Christine, I need an early grade permit. We want to start now. And before I got back to Portland, I had a call from Christine saying, you got a grading permit. Let's get going. So that's why this project went really well, because the city really helped support us and believe in our vision. And that's how we got to build communities and affordable housing. If different cities work with us this way, it's going to work very well. And either our multifamily now, I mean, single family, we're just about through it as you're watching it. That's our last phase. We'll be done and developed by the end of this year. And our plan was 2025 was our schedule. So we're almost a year and a half, 2 years ahead of schedule. Our multifamily is under construction now. That will be completely done by July 1st of 2024 as well. And that's a year ahead of schedule. We started lease up last week. It's leasing up very quick. Just this morning, they had 3 applications when I stopped by there. So the demand is here. I think we're in for that US market. So we got to use it for the market. That's going to go in front of the apartments. That will break ground next spring. The church is going in as we speak. So yeah, it's been a fun, successful project. You know, lots of different obstacles in the way. Big risk. I mean, 2 other developers tried it and couldn't get it across the finish line. But this is what we focus on: is big, large tract projects. 100-acre projects is what we'd love to do. So if you have neighbors, friends, anybody that's selling big projects like this, we'd love to buy them. I've got cards on the table. We got 4 active projects of this size. This is the smallest one that we're doing right now. And they're all coming to a completion. So we're looking for land, not marketing, but if there's, Springfield or anybody around here that's looking to sell, we're looking. So that's all I got. Thank you guys for working with us.
Okay. Okay. Which is down? That one? Or is that up?
I guess. You want to point it as like it's an M. So
I see.
yeah, there you go.
All right.
So this is.
One more.
Eventually, oh, here we go. All right, cool. So my name's Chris Goodell. I'm a principal, project manager, and land use planning manager for AKS Engineering. Been with the company about 16 years. And before that, I did county planning in Washington County. Our company, AKS, is a land development and public infrastructure consulting company. So if you see stuff being put in the ground, pipes, utilities, earth moving, that's the kind of stuff that we do. So on this project here, we have a slide. There you go. So Andy alluded to or spoke about the approved master plan that we had in place when we started on the project. So we had approvals to build this project, but the goal was to build this project. So we worked with the city. Oops. Difficulty, so that Karl paid for. The interest, like Karl said, they wanted to hit the ground running. We didn't have time to start off fresh. We had to work with what was already partially approved. So the first phase of the project was built per the master plan that was already approved. And then while that was getting built, we were working really hard to get these other applications approved. And there's partitions. We modified the master plan to go ahead and do what Karl wanted to do instead of the approved one. So we had to, in order to do that, there was master plan modifications. We had to amend the comp plan, which is called the Metro Plan Diagram. It's something special you got here in Springfield and Eugene. And we did property line adjustments, partitions. We did multifamily site plan review. Let's see, and commercial site plan review. So right now, what we've got is the property is probably about 3/4 done. I mean, the only thing left is really that's not in the works is the school site, which is in purple there. I don't know what the
That'll be a few years.
okay, so that's a few years out, I guess. But that'll be the only thing not done here pretty soon, which is it's a really fast timeline to see all that, to see this amount of applications processed. I mean, we buried Andy with our paperwork and maps. And, this is all, we were talking about this the other day when we met. This was all during COVID, right? I mean, the first time I met Andy was like 2 months before the COVID shutdown. And then
next summer, there was the massive wildfires. So there were some real challenges going on that were abnormal. So doing all this was something I won't forget. It was a lot of work. It was really great working with city staff. I can't say enough good things about working with Andy. That those applications were all tricky in process. The Springfield Development Code it's a bit cumbersome. It's unique. I've worked in probably 30 to 40 jurisdictions in my life, and Springfield's is different than everybody. Not that it's bad, it's a lot of process. But without Andy and his coworkers there, we would have drowned in all the process. And so I can't say enough good things about Andy. This map here. One other thing that I want to touch on is I work with our natural resources group pretty closely, and specifically in this project, we had water areas and wetlands. So this site had an approved wetland delineation concurrence from the Department of State Lands when Karl bought it. And there was a lot of wetlands on the site. And our specialist went out there and took a look and said, you know, there are some wetlands out there for sure, but we don't think they're nearly as big as these maps are showing. So we took the time, we looked it all over, and those wetlands shrunk by, I think, like 8 acres of wetlands to like less than an acre. So you can really see, it's probably hard to see, but all these light blue areas are areas that were considered wetlands, and it ended up being just these small areas, not including the Pierce Ditch, which we were initially told the Pierce Ditch wasn't a jurisdictional feature, meaning it wasn't regulated by the Corps of Engineers or Department of State Lands. And that ended up to be not true. So we had to get permits. And in this case, the master plan that was approved before had all sorts of changes, alterations to the Pierce Ditch, make it meandering and do all sorts of things with it. And that stuff would have been almost impossible to get approved. So that was one of the first things we worked on, was getting that part of the master plan amended. At the end of the day, we ended up with 2 crossings of the Pierce Ditch, which was the road network largely stayed the same between the approved master plan and then what we ended up doing. And let's see. Yeah, I guess with regard to, we saved Karl quite a bit of money with our updated wetland delineations, because we estimated when you have wetland impacts, you basically, most of the time, you go and pay a wetland mitigation bank, somebody that's already developed wetlands, and they charge you on a per acre basis to go ahead and use those credits as for filling the wetland in. In this case, it was, I think, originally estimated with 8 acres being almost $800,000 of wetland mitigation bank fees, and we got it down to like $60,000. So it's a big difference. So we had the 2 crossings of the Pierce Ditch, and it's hard to see, but this is a box culvert, but it's massive. I mean, if you can see those workers down there in the right-hand corner, it was a big deal. And this is for mainly because we were told that initially this wasn't jurisdictional. You don't need anything special to cross the ditch. Found out not true at all. It was jurisdictional, and we had to have real special crossings. This is for fish passage. So that's why this is the way it is. It's huge, and it's a big cost. So, and I think that's all I have on the planning. Okay, well, I'm going to hand this to you. That's the button.
That's my I'm Monty Hurley with AKS Engineering. Work with Chris and Karl. I'm just going to touch on kind of some of the construction challenges and so on. Chris kind of mentioned some of those, and Karl touched on some of the topics too. So when we're looking at a site, there's kind of 2 kinds of sites that are the toughest ones around. They're either super steep or super flat. And there's challenges with both, right? So this one had all the flat challenges. And we'll touch on those. The sanitary sewer, we had some issues with B Street alignment, early grading, which Karl touched on. raised intersections, stormwater, and then the pandemic and natural disaster, which was obviously COVID and fires. And so with regard to the sanitary sewer, and I'll back up one, and I'll do some pointing here, probably, but phase 1A was the only area of the site that we could get sanitary sewer to without crossing Pierce Ditch. And the timeline was super critical. So we had a small phase up there in the corner, and we brought sewer in off of 31st there. After that, we had to bring the sewer across. It was on the south side of Pierce Ditch, and to develop the single family residential lots, which were the first phases we were working on, we had to bring it across Pierce Ditch. Problem was we were still working on the wetland delineation to get it reduced to something more manageable, and working on getting permits. So that proved pretty challenging. We got that first phase in, and then right after that, we didn't have the permits to cross Pierce Ditch. So we ended up having to bore the sewer under Pierce Ditch, again, costing Karl some more money, but timeline was important. So we were kind of pushing things through. The challenges on the sewer is everything's so flat out there. And so when you got to run sewer at a certain grade, comes a point where it starts daylight and popping out of the ground. And so getting to all the corners of the site was very challenging. There were a lot of pipes that actually only have about a foot of cover under the streets at the upper ends. So you're barely kind of getting everything to flow and work through the whole site. So on B Street, it was part of the same kind of phasing issue we had. V Street comes out right at the kind of top of Pierce Ditch. Couldn't get the permits in time, so we worked with city staff to basically put in sort of a temporary reduced section in there for the first phases to kind of keep things going. And so we were able to build phases, 1B, 1C, and phases 2 before we were able to get the permit for Pierce Ditch and keep the project moving forward. Karl mentioned early grading. Early grading challenges are always tough because you're trying to get your grading and your dirt work done during dry weather before the winter, and we wanted to keep pushing construction through the winter, so we have to get our grading done. Again, challenges with wetlands not being fully permitted is we ended up with these little lakes out there where the wetlands works we couldn't fill. We finally got the fill permits, and then we were able to fill those areas, so we were working around that the whole time. Raised intersections. So the city, to our knowledge, had never actually had concrete raised tabletop intersections required for developers in past projects. And so kind of working with engineering staff, it's something they wanted to do here. It's better for some of the ADA requirements and so on, but it's a little bit unique. I don't know that you can see that photo super well, but what you're able to do with some of the concrete intersections is you got the ADA ramps coming out flat, and it's kind of some traffic calming, some of those things, which are kind of nice, but there's some challenges in getting those to be constructed correctly. And then there's stormwater. So anybody that does much around construction in the winter in the Willamette Valley, you realize kind of the water table is like right up almost to the surface. Well, this site didn't have a robust stormwater infrastructure downstream. So there wasn't a lot of pipes or anything for the stormwater to go. And we didn't have very high infiltration rates. So spent a lot of time on the site, did some extra geotech work early on, and ended up with, I think it was 7 stormwater facilities across the site. And basically, those are all designed as infiltration facilities, but it was a challenge getting them to work with the high water table. So you gotta have some separation from the high water table. You also gotta have the infiltration ability of the soil, and you gotta have some overflows because there are, in big storm events, there are problems with infiltration facilities. You don't wanna flood all the homes that you're putting in the community. So we kind of strategically put them around the site with some good overflows, and have had some pretty wet winters here, and they've worked through it. So we're happy with that. We touched on this just, I think Chris and Karl both did, but right when we started off this project and we're meeting with staff and doing all those things, going in the right direction, then COVID happens. And, I think staff was sent home for about a year. They're working from home and they kind of powered through it with us. And Karl kind of has the get her done attitude, and COVID wasn't going to stop anything. We just kept rolling, right? And so we just powered through all that. And a lot of the cities and other projects we were working on, that kind of slowed way down. That just those projects almost came to a standstill in some cases. It really hurt a lot of developers and a lot of contractors. But the city of Springfield worked right with us and just kept pushing this thing through, and that wasn't a problem. And Karl kind of mentioned when we started the project, he kind of laid out a schedule for us. And I remember sitting down with him and going, Karl, you're nuts. There's no way we're going to make this project work on that. We do a lot of large development projects, with Karl and so on. And this just, I didn't see, with all the challenges on this site and everything that was going on, I just did not see that we could get the project done in that time frame. And when you look at the actual schedule, we're a year or two ahead of schedule on it. And it's a real, credit to Karl for kind of pushing things through, and credit to the city for working with us. And that really enabled everything to move forward. I think now I was gonna touch on a couple of stats if I can get to them here. Yeah, home construction started, I know our site work started in 2020. Home construction started in 2020 also. I think December of 2020 is when they started submitting building permits. To date, they have started or completed 226 residential homes. And I think they're averaging 6.5 home starts and sales per month, which is pretty good. Some highlights on the project. A number of these were touched on before, but when it's done, there's gonna be 446 single-family homes, 312 apartment units. There's 13 acres for a future school site, 8 acres for the church, which is under construction, 4,000 square feet of a convenience store, 8,000 square feet medical office building, almost a half-mile walking trail along Pierce Ditch, and another half-mile of multi-use trails kind of throughout the development. 2.5 miles of streets and sidewalks and utility infrastructure throughout the site. 7 stormwater facilities. We got pedestrian connections to the UWeb trail to the north, and also ped connections to the west. And just want to acknowledge the partners, the city, KIPCO, I&E, kind of leading the charge on this to make it happen. And a number of names I kind of wanted to throw out there. Karl mentioned Christine Limbird, the mayor. She helped get this thing going. We're at Nancy Newton, city manager, Christina Krass. She was a big part of the assistant city attorney. She helped on a lot of things there. Andy Limbird, Clayton McEachron in the engineering department, Jeff Pascal, community development director, I think now, right? And Michael Liebler, transportation engineer, Todd Singleton, an engineering technician, helped us with some of the LDAP review, which helped facilitate those early grading permits. Denny Wright, construction inspector, and then Michelle Limbarger and Thane Smith, which are in your building department, which really helped on the multifamily, kind of pushing some of that stuff through for Karl. Also a big thanks to KIPCO, general contractor, local contractor, that just kept kind of pushing through the site, working with Karl and us, and really made things happen. I think this being successful had a lot to do with, Karl's vision and commitment to create the community, and then just the trust in the city and us and KIPCO and everything to kind of push things through. So
Don't forget about Courtney, was economic development gal. She was a big help.
yes, yep. And with that, I guess, any questions you have for me or Carl, Chris, Andy?
Traffic. How did you deal with like the roads and the traffic and figuring that out? Is there more to come?
Well, so early on, and Andy touched on this a little bit, that with the original master plan that was on the site had a lot more traffic anticipated. So when we got involved and looked at the required infrastructure, actually the traffic demands were way less because residential is a lot less than commercial. So we have frontage improvements, we have the intersections and everything, but when we went through the required traffic studies, what the infrastructure that we're putting in along the frontages and those intersections is all that's required.
So there won't be any light like at any of those other intersections?
There won't be any additional lights.
Oh, really?
Question about the school. I think you mentioned it's a few years out. My understanding is they're still searching for funding for the school. Can you just give an update on how the school?
Sure. Not speaking for the school district. Typically, they would probably be doing probably needing a bond measure or something for school construction. My understanding is from discussions with school representatives when they were looking at the site is it'd probably be a middle school. It would be in addition to Yolanda and Briggs that are just to the north there. So not to replace those schools, but I mean, there'll be about 2,000 people plus or minus living in the neighborhood once it's fully constructed and occupied. So there will be a significant school population generated just by that neighborhood. And then the school district can look at kind of reconfiguring how they do busing and where they're bringing people in, students in from, in order to look at viability of that school. What I anticipate we'll probably see is that there will be a partnership with Willamette for like an initial, maybe like a playground or a community park or maybe dog run or something like that, where the 13 acres can be utilized, maybe put some soccer fields in or something prior to the school going in. We have the same situation down south off of Bob Straw Parkway at the south end of the Jasper Meadows neighborhood. There's Quartz Park. That's a school site. And so they installed a small parking lot area and a playground for the neighborhood there. So that's kind of a front ending some of the improvements to allow the neighborhood to enjoy the open space before an actual school gets built. And it might be several years before a school gets built. However, we have a lot of development interest now in the areas just to the south of that site, extending down along Bob Straw Parkway. Some of the same players may be in play here with Chris's group, looking at a potential 300 plus acre development area down there with a couple thousand homes. So that school site might come up to the front burner for Jasper Meadows. Yeah, it's just on the east side. So the area surrounding the Quartz Park there.
So Chris had mentioned some cumbersomeness with the permitting process and the code. I know a lot of this was going on at the same time that Mark was working on the code updates. Is that addressed for future development projects through the code updates, or?
I would say a significant portion has been updated, but some of there's a real big heavy lift that the developer had to do to change the zoning and the comprehensive plan designation and the master plans, which require public hearings and a lot of work with the planning commission and with the city council to get all of that land use changed to allow for a new kind of development template to be superimposed on the neighborhood. And so I'm not sure that those processes are any more easy to navigate, but it's some of the more common types of applications such as land divisions, site plan, development, those types of development reviews that have been simplified and looking at more clear and objective standards that many communities in the state have been looking to, where we can kind of have a checklist of things and streamline development review and approval process.
Can you talk a little bit more about the multifamily and affordable housing?
There was no affordable housing, like true affordable housing based on, to my knowledge, based on like any income thresholds. The multi-unit housing, is 312, like walk-up apartments. And I think there's 27 buildings. There's over 24 buildings, on the site, which is right at Pierce Parkway, extended across 28th Street. And so it's actually splits. Pierce Parkway, there's a component on the north side and mostly on the south side. So my understanding is based on the developer's information, it's their rental, leased apartments. I think the unit composition.
Yeah, they're market rate housing. There is a leasing office on the job site now. If you want more information, they're leasing out on site. You can go over, get what you need.
I'm super impressed that, I'm not very well versed in the sector, but it seems super impressive that you've been a year or two ahead of this, ahead of the game. Is that a trade-off because you're over budget, or have you come in ahead of time and under budget? Can you speak on that?
It's team effort. So if I didn't have an engineer like AKS in the city that didn't want to work with us, we would be stuck in, we'd be 2 years behind schedule. We all teamed up. The city said, we're going to help you get through this and we're going to do what we can. AKS had to just really grind and start putting applications in, and me in the back end just push, scream and push every day. Let's go, let's go, let's go.
It seems like a lot of improvising for this project. Is that fair to say too? Are you accustomed to like working on the fly?
That's who I am. I'm good at that. We're I&E Construction, we're based out of Wilsonville, Oregon, but we're East Coast, West Coast, so we've got a big operation in Florida, Orlando, Jacksonville, and then we're here, Oregon, Washington, so we've got projects going in Seattle, Salem, we've got 2,000 homes going to Salem, so I'm the owner, I'm a sole owner, and I just love it, I love it, and I push. So when we own a bunch of different companies, but this is what we do and how we do it.
I'd say from the follow-up to that, on the city's perspective, there was a kind of a trust factor too. It's like the city was trying to make accommodations that we can. We have some code limitations. We have some other regulatory requirements that we're bound to, but we can try to work as best we can with a developer and who has a master plan in place, which is a significant investment on their part. So there's already a level of surety that, we're going to eventually get to this end picture. And so we may have to kind of find a way to navigate exactly how to get to the end goal. And it might be a little bit of a meandering path along the way. But I think not only with the COVID challenges, the city did not used to have any digital submittals. There was no way to digital submit. It was all hard copies. And so they would send, it's like, oh, AKS is sending stuff, and we get these giant, like crates of all of the submittals. And so now, fortunately, with COVID, which kind of accelerated by necessity, online presence, and now we are doing Zoom meetings. We're able to do things, remotely, which didn't have that technology at all before COVID hit. It's made things a lot more flexible for out of town submittals, people who do submittals over the weekend or online, email stuff to us, make online payments. So all of those things have contributed, and this is one of the major, I guess, benefiting parties is through their submittals kind of necessitated those changes on the fly.
Well, one more thing to add to that. When I met with the city mayor, we were going to lose a year. Monty called me, he was like, we're not going to grade this year. I'm going, we're running out of time. We got to grade. So I got a hold of the city mayor that same afternoon. I go, I need to see it. She's like, for what? Can't wait till next week. I'm like, no, we got to meet for lunch today. So she's like, all right, I'll make it happen. I showed up for lunch. By the time I was back to Portland, she had me written. And if it wasn't for that meeting and her not wanting to work with me, we wouldn't grade until the following year. So it was an entire year. Just that one meeting gave us a year. So it's things like that that make things happen. When the city wants to work with a developer, things can actually happen. It's got to be teamwork. And that's the biggest problem with affordable housing right now is nobody wants to team up with a developer. It's always city, developer, and you're working on two different teams and you're fighting all the way through the process. If we can all get together and work as a team and collaborate, affordable housing aspect would go away. We would be able to bring the prices of housing down and make it happen. But it's always a fight. There's no trust. As long as we trust one another, we're gonna be able to go out there and build thousands of homes. And that's the biggest issue is we're always we're at war. And so what do you get?
I agree 100% with Karl, and to add to that, we've got projects that are half this size and in say the city of Portland, for example. You know, we work on that project smaller, and it was not nearly the amount of issues that Monty talked about, or Karl. And we're over a year in, and still spinning our wheels and with nothing much accomplished. And it shows the difference between Springfield and some of the other cities that we've worked in. It couldn't be, it's absolutely true.
Yeah, I mean, I want a dock city, but we have one right now that started a year before this, same size, but we're not even halfway through. We had 2 years to go, and our only problem is the city. And we're 2 years behind schedule because of the city. So it's, I mean, it's just where it goes. I've got a project in Pendleton, Oregon, and that's the city that works. Pendleton calls me and said, Karl, we need apartments in our city because nobody's going in and doing it. And I'm going, who's going to move to Pendleton? Who's going to come in there and move to the apartments? And so I'm going back and forth, and I can't make it work. And the city goes, Karl, here's your property. We'll give you the property. Build apartments. I said, how about SECs? No SECs. I'm like, all right, we can make this work. So we started put it together. We just wrapped up 204 units in Pendleton, Oregon, right below the college, above the prison. And we start lease up, it's just slow. We're going, God, this is not gonna work. And we opened up May of this year, May 20th. And we've got 50 units moved in, 20 more moving in before August 20th, and 54 more applications in 2 months. So 204 units will get filled up within a 6-month period. I mean, that's the housing shortage that people talk about. Again, Pendleton came up and said, we're gonna make it work, let's figure it out. And that's what cities gotta do for affordability, is work together and make it work.
I have a question for the contractors. We've lived by Pierce Park, that's what it said on the map, for 48 years. We had a little pet fox out in the middle of that field that appears to be gone now. Do you think it'll ever, I'm kidding. But I have a question. It ain't coming back. That long straight road you see is where we used to pet them and feed them. We didn't. I understand Camas swales a little bit and there's a big one. I think the biggest one on the property. That's kind of across from Arrow Park. Ringing a bell? Okay. So it was put in, expensive plants planted around and on the side walls and big drains on the, looks like the south end. We live a block from your development. We butt up to the right path. Anyway, so that in the rain, in the winter, began to fill up. Covered some of those expensive first layer, expensive second layer. And we were kind of joking, Joanna and I, kind of joking like, well, that's getting pretty close to the top of the ground. And then it came over. It came over the sidewalk. And miraculously, it was fixed. Where'd that water go?
It's like that part.
The very first one.
Very well.
Yeah, remember the big pipes there? We did a tour.
On the far north end. Yeah, we raised stuff up a little bit there after we put that.
Is there another pipe in there?
Well, we put that storm pond in, I think, the second summer. Yeah, and then after we went through that winter, we beefed up around that pond, and then we have an overflow that goes to the north there on the other side of the UN Trail.
Right.
And since then, it seems like it hasn't been as bad. That's been our observation, at least.
Well, we haven't had I'm positive about this thing. I'm not being negative at all. It's just that water went away so quickly. And then there was a cut in the path and
We raised everything up.
We raised everything up a little bit, but, as I was saying, the soils out here infiltrate some, but they're great, right? Sure. And we have a lot of projects, kind of everywhere. And what we found on the infiltration facilities is that first winter is always the worst. I don't know if it's just coincidence that we always get the most rain that winter after the project's done, or it's something in the soils before you get everything kind of established, where it just doesn't seem like it infiltrates as well in that first winter. And then after that, the facilities always seem to work a little bit better. So I don't know that I have any engineering reason on that other than it's been our experience that that's been the case. And then we did, to Carl's point, we raised some things up, beefed it up, and got that overflow to the north just in case. So.
Well, we'll keep reporting.
All right. Hey, let us know the spots.
Well, the good thing is, I'll be your neighbor forever. So we build apartments, we own them. So I'll retain those forever. We don't sell them. So I'll be the neighbor for Springfield, for the rest of my life.
If there's a storm problem, then Carl will call me.
Andy, I got a question online for you. How much additional tax revenue does the city plan to realize through this development?
Well, the county will realize it all, and the city will get a proportion of that once all of the assessments are done for the improvements. So I don't know what the ultimate assessor's market valuation will be once the dust settles on things. We have a couple of sites that will be tax exempt, like the school site and the church. There's commercial properties that are coming online when we have a development already in hand. I think it was mentioned, there's a convenience store, coffee market, that'll be on Marcola Road near the intersection of 28th Street. And then there's a plans for a medical clinic, specialty ophthalmology clinic right at the corner of 28th and Marcola Road. That'll probably be the next year or two. I think the site has already been purchased by the developer. All of those things will add value, and I don't know exactly how much valuation there will be. It'll have to be something that'll have to be calculated based on residential market rates, and then the commercial built form will also significantly increase taxable benefits to the city. I mean, it'll be a significant plus to the city having that 100 acres essentially built out. And so a portion of that being residential, significant portion, and then others being commercial elements too. So I don't have the answer for that, unfortunately, right now, because we're not done. It's not quite done yet. So yes.
The Pierce ditch was mentioned several times, and what was the kind of the history behind that? And did it involve fish passage at one time?
My understanding is that was dug as mostly just a drainage ditch to allow for water to come through the site. And the former owners, the Pierces, had put in a culvert and kind of a crossing to allow their equipment to go across the ditch. I mean, we call it a ditch, we could call it a channel or something. I mean, it is a water feature that has drainage from East Springfield and the area near the Irving Slough that goes across the site and then takes a 90-degree angle south and comes out at Q Street, right near the medical clinics where there's their Albertsons and Rite Aid shopping center there. So it will go behind the church and come out underneath it, join the Q Street drainage channel. So eventually just the land. So it's connected, and therefore, I guess potentially a tributary to waters that could be somewhat bearing, and that's probably the reason why the fish passage was necessary through the box culverts and that sort of thing. So there's water there. I don't know how much. I don't think you can find much in the way of trout or salmon species, but I guess technically it is fish bearing. So, and there are fish. I mean, there are fish in there. I'm not sure what they are. They're probably warm water fish. So yeah, that was necessitated that. So it's the over time, the various segments of that facility will be rehabilitated. So a lot of its intent is to eventually get rid of all the blackberries, get rid of all the overgrowth, and make it more of a functional waterway conveyance and an amenity eventually to the neighborhood. Sure, other hand goes up.
One more question. I used to work in the multifamily industry, and the last 2 years, I didn't see a single project get completed on time for labor, for materials. So how did you get the labor? How did you not get behind on materials? Did you have nothing imported or any?
No, so we planned well ahead. So right now alone, we've got 1,500 units under construction. I mean, from Pendleton to Salem here and all over the place. And we plan, before we break ground on an apartment deal, we pre-buy all of our stuff in order. And before we get going, we get going, and the material's all on site. We are in a hiccup right now. We can't get power gear. It was supposed to be September 1. We can actually have people move in there next month.
Yeah.
But our power gear for our buildings is back ordered till November 1. So we're gonna be stuck here for a couple of months without people in just because of power. It's an issue. We're fighting it every day, but we're really trying to stay ahead of it and just making sure that we plan it and keep doing it. The thing about us, we're a little different as general contractor and developers. We've got a lot of in-house employees. So we've got 350 in-house employees.
Got it.
So all our concrete, dirt here, we teamed up with a local contractor just because we were very busy and they were here in town and they knew the soil. So Kitco's done a really good job for us, and it's been a great connection with them. But everything else, like my framers, they follow us. Concrete is all done in the house. Siding, paint, windows is all done in the house. So I'm gonna back up a little bit. So my history in construction is I do construction defect. That's what I still focus on every day. That's the main part of I&E Construction is repair sick buildings. And it's the biggest business you can think of, because it's just every day we're getting a new call on a 10, 15, $20 million repair. In Miami, you guys saw that collapse that happened last year with that concrete restoration building.
Yeah.
We've got 3 of those buildings under construction repair right now in Florida on the beach because they're failing concrete restoration. So I really know buildings and how they work and how they breathe, and that's what you're gonna love about these buildings. They're gonna look good for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. They're gonna look brand new if we maintain them and really build a building to last. But we stay ahead of it, and we've got enough resources to make sure that things happen.
And say hi to Gary Dell for me.
Gary who?
Gary Dell. Is he not there?
He's our estimator.
Yeah.
One of our estimators, yeah, first slide, yeah.
Well, if I have time for 1 or 2 more questions before we need to wrap up, are there any other questions that folks would like to ask the presentation team?
I got one.
Yes, Drew.
I've ridden my bike through there a couple times, and the on-street parking, I'm not gonna say that it's an issue, but what is your messaging around that perceived parking issue throughout the neighborhood? I've heard complaints, just anecdotally throughout the last year and a half.
Are you looking at me? Or are you looking at me? So I'll try and answer your question. So there are single-sided parking streets within the neighborhood where there are parking allowed on one side, the other side is signed no parking. The city does not really have enforcement of no parking, I would say, throughout the city. And so there are often people parked, in fact, we have Google Street View images of people parked facing the wrong direction in front of a fire hydrant and a no parking sign. So clearly, there is some issues with parking in the neighborhood. I mean, theoretically, everyone has 4 parking spaces off street with 2 in the garage and 2 on the front driveway. Whether or not those are actually being effectively utilized or not, that's up to the users, I guess. We have heard people complaining about the parking, although they're also competing with a lot of tradespeople right now. So there's a lot of personnel in the neighborhood parking on the street, competing with the actual residents for parking. They're not gonna be the ones parking in the driveway. They're gonna be people parking on the street. So once everything is complete and everybody's left, all of the tradespeople doing all of the work in all of the buildings, which is basically throughout the whole neighborhood right now, it'll probably come to some equilibrium, and hopefully people will honor the no parking. There has been concerns expressed actually by the fire department. And so the city is gonna have to probably look at ways to reinforce the no parking message through either painted curbs or something similar to that, to make sure that if there's an emergency call, the fire and ambulance can actually get there and navigate the streets where people illegally parked on both sides. It makes it too narrow for some of the trucks to make their maneuvering and that sort of thing. So that'll happen once, and then hopefully it doesn't result in an emergency or a house burning to the ground because nobody could get there. But that has been one aspect, as we're looking to be more efficient, and we're getting pressure from the state to, reduce street sizes, reduce parking provision. There's always the sort of reality check that a lot of people have multiple vehicles and they don't want to necessarily park on their driveway. Also, they're parking on the streets and that sort of thing. So balancing act, yes, in this case.
But no commitment from Springfield PD or department.
I think it's probably would be someone that is like the lowest, I mean, that's my understanding is that like parking enforcement is kind of the lowest priority, I would imagine, for Springfield PD. But that's not to say that it couldn't be prioritized somehow, or the city could look at some type of private partnership like they do in the downtown parking program, where there's parking enforcement through basically, private contracted parking enforcement rather than the actual police department. That might be an option too. Don't know where the funding would come from that either, so.
I have one more. Nobody wants that. So state of Oregon, we are currently removing all parking mandates citywide. And most metro areas are doing this. Springfield is going through it now. As a developer, are you going to continue to provide parking even though it's no longer required for either multifamily or single unit?
On our multifamily, I'm always gonna provide 1.5 unit, parking stalls per unit. That's just our product, what we built over and over. It works, it parks well. I've got stuff that's less than that in my early career that I built, and we struggle and fight. So I'm gonna stick to the parking as much as I can. But there's cities now that are trying to force us not to put any parking in. So it's, the state's trying to make it so hard on parking. So in areas where we go in and they force us not to put parking in, we've got no choice.
Are these all electric, the homes and apartments, will natural gas be an option for people?
On the multifamily, it's all electric. They're built very efficient, but they're all electric.
Natural gas in the rest of the neighborhood, right?
Yeah, homes, I think.
Yeah.
There is natural gas in the area available.
Yeah.
Any last question? Okay, well, not seeing any. I want to thank our presenters again today for giving us a very robust presentation, answering a lot of questions. Really appreciate the turnout. I want to just do a plug for our next meeting, which is on August 17th. It will be the Springfield Economic Development Update provided by the city's economic development team. So August 17th, this room at noon. Again, we hope to see you here. Thanks everyone for turning out.
Thanks for the little stuff.
Yeah.